So a couple ways how my book has affected me was so my book talks a lot about or in this case my podcast talks a lot about ways to have job security. Job security is a big word to say. Job security is a lot of things that it can be, but some of the littlest things could be, let's say you're mowing the lawn and right there is the trash can. Doing your last stripe back up because you do your perimeter pass. Why don't you just take the trash can back up for the more elderly people that don't have the time or the muscle to really do that, and especially if you're like plowing and you see the trash cans out there, just take it up for them. That extra 10 seconds for you could mean you get that client for an extra 10 years. It makes the biggest difference, and it makes so much of a difference for clientele, word of mouth, and that's the next big thing that they roll into in my book is, advertising is a big thing, but also when you advertise and you can have your clients comment on posts or things that you post or things that are on your website or page. No one starts out just owning a multi-million-dollar company. You have to build it. And that's a big thing with here in Michigan, and that book, is based off of a guy that started his lawn care business, and it's actually a guy from West Michigan Lawn Care. So it really shows that you can go from nothing to something big as long as you take the right steps and you're willing to grind and put in the time and work of that lawn care business. But you can't just wake up every morning and sit there and own a multi-million-dollar company and not put in any of the work. The good bosses, as in my book that says, bosses can be bosses, but bosses can be bad bosses. And what he means by bosses can be bosses is because I can still be your boss, but I'll still be down there getting my hands just as dirty, if not dirtier than you are. And I will stay just as late as you stay, if not later. That's a boss being a boss, but also being a worker still. But being a bad boss would be partly, sitting there and not helping in, not chipping in for anything, sitting there and just letting your workers do the work. That's not I wouldn't call that a good boss, but I wouldn't call that a bad boss. I mean, it really all depends on the type of boss name you're trying to give yourself. I think that if you're a boss, don't start having workers unless you can pay them for what they're worth. And I ask people this all the time, and this really reflects on my book and what you're capable of doing. But one of the things my book pretty much, I wouldn't say preaches, but also preaches at the most, but really harps on, is the factor of being able to pay your guys good. We're in COVID times, so obviously the pay is a lot different. Inflation is crazy, so my prices had to get raised. So then guys wanted to get paid more because they saw that, they saw I was getting paid more for jobs. And that's, a one big thing that kind of just rolls into everything is if you have a guy coming off the streets, has 6 years of experience, and he's a really great hard worker, stays after, does the extra things, doesn't complain, gets his work done on time, and sometimes early, but does all the good things, do not pay him crappy. Do not sit there and cheap out and try to pay someone more because they were able to come in at a certain time or 10 minutes early. But if that guy is always sitting there, always doing what he's supposed to do, and always, doing that extra mile and everything, you have to pay him more. Now, this also rolls into the part side of these guys that want to get paid, 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour doing landscaping jobs, which could happen, but you have to know how to draw them out. You got to be able to order the materials, find the cheapest material. You got to be able to upcharge the most without upcharging too much. There's so much stuff that goes into landscaping jobs. That's why you can get paid 30, 40 bucks an hour. It sounds insane, but it's really not. But some guys come off the streets with not even a year of experience yet, or they had a year at West Michigan Lawn Care, or they had a year somewhere and all they did was mow, and they claim to do something else. That's why in my business, experience plays a big factor in your pay. If you're working for me out of high school, if you're working for me in high school, if you're working for me in general, I have you do tests, not necessarily paper or pencil, but kind of just knowledge tests, like quick questions, because that shows me that if you've been doing this 4 or 5 years, you'll know how to kind of somewhat explain on the spot how to grade a gravel driveway, or how to grade a wall, or how to build a retaining wall, or some of the materials you need to build a retaining wall and stuff like that. It definitely plays a big factor in what you're doing for pay. It's just like certifications in college. If you're in college, and the more certifications you have, employers look at that and pay you more because you have that knowledge. You have what you kind of need to fulfill that spot, let alone a guy that comes off the streets and just can work hard. Knowledge is almost more than anything, so that definitely plays a big factor in what you're doing versus what you're not doing.